Coming up next on this post-Thanksgiving edition of 30 with Lee, we are talking Creed 2, starring Michael B. Jordan and Sylvester Stallone. Me and the beautiful and the lovely Tammy are going to be talking about this movie. You know, when we saw this movie this go round, exactly 3 years to the day exactly when we had saw the first Creed. So, how does Creed 2 stack up with the Rocky Balboa franchise? Well, find out next on this special edition of 30 with Lee that begins right now.
The following is an Infinity One Productions presentation. Keeping it honest, insightful, interactive.
If we don't do what we love, then we wouldn't exist.
It's time, kid.
It's like nothing really matters to him right now, including me.
You gotta think real hard about this. You got people that need you now.
I'm taking the fight.
Victor Drago, son of Ivan Drago, who infamously killed Apollo Creed, appeared today to issue a challenge to Adonis Creed.
Don't do this.
I ain't got a choice.
That's the same thing your father said, and he died right here in my hands. That kid was raised in hate. It's dangerous. He broke things in me that ain't never been fixed. It ain't worth it.
It's not just us anymore, Dick.
I want to rewrite history.
If you want to fight this man, that's your business. But don't pretend this is about your father.
This here is all about my wife, my kids, the life that I live. Through the night, I was his. It was right what I did. My ups and downs, my slips, my falls, my trials and tribulations, my heart, my walls.
This won't be the end of me. Or you. It can't be, because we're a team.
Now you know what you're fighting for.
Round after round, you learn more about yourself. And when I stepped in that ring, it wasn't all about me.
Lee's his name. Movies is his game. You're listening to 30 with Lee. Now kick back, baby, and enjoy.
Thank you for checking out 30 with Lee. Lee is my name and movies is my game. You're checking out 30 with Lee. Join along with the beautiful and the lovely Tammy. And Tammy, we are here for a very good reason. I'm so happy we're able to deliver this for the listeners. We told them there was going to be a boatload of good content for Patreon. Things kind of slowed up a little bit on Patreon, so we do apologize to you guys. But you know, with the holidays and all, and as we are doing this recording, we are pretty much freshly removed from the Thanksgiving holiday, Black Friday, all that stuff that's going on. So I would imagine a lot of our colleagues out there really didn't put that much audio out there, but we wanted to get this out to you as soon as humanly possible. Now that things have almost kind of slowed down a little bit, because now we're pretty much just going towards Cyber Tuesday, and that's pretty much going to be it until really the third week of December, because that's when really everything starts to hit the fan as far as last minute shopping, Christmas, New Year's, all that good stuff.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, so we're here. We're talking about Creed 2. And if you know anything about the 30 with Lee series, is we pretty much have reviewed every single Rocky movie that came out to this day. Yes, to this day, I still have people that say to me, hey, I found out about your show because of you and Tammy's reviews for the Rocky movies.
Neat.
Yeah. I get that from time to time, and I love that. I had it a couple of times this year, so it's interesting how we have people that just, out of the clear blue, they let their opinion be heard. Hey, I've been checking you out since blah, 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 good stuff, you know. So I know that we have people that have been eagerly anticipating this, right? So let's properly set this up for you guys. So first off, let's talk about things from a director's standpoint. So Ryan Coogler, sadly, did not come back to the helm for this sequel, which was a little bit of a bummer because he alone had came up with the perfect script in Creed 1 that Stallone read, and he told the story about how this all had came together with Creed, and he was for it, and he loved it. And sadly, Ryan Coogler wasn't available because of his commitment to Marvel Entertainment. He was directing Black Panther. Of course, he had Michael B. Jordan over there as well. And ultimately, what ended up happening was Creed 2 moved on without Ryan Coogler, who did, though, serve as executive producer. So instead, the directing responsibilities would go to Stephen J. Capel Jr. And if that name sounds a little bit familiar to you guys, it should, because he's pretty much been, if not a writer, he's definitely been a director. You all may recall a little bit of his work so far from the ABC spinoff series Grown-ish. He's directed a couple of episodes. He also had directed 2016's The Land. And he also had partial credits for 2011's 25 Heel as a production assistant. So this young man, his career is really kind of just getting...
Sounds a little green.
This is definitely green. Everything had really began for him with his student film, A Different Tree, which had won HBO film short competition, HBO short film competition in 2013. Awesome. Yeah, so everything pretty much had began for him there, and he's been getting, recognized here and there. But I mean, this movie that you talk about, the biggest test to date with Creed 2.
I would say so.
Talk about your feet being thrown into the fire there. That's very interesting. Now, with regards to the screenplay for Creed 2, the screenplay was by Jewel Taylor and Sylvester Stallone. The story is by Sasha Penn and Chow Hodora Coker. Okay, so we've got some interesting new characters and a combination of returning characters into this one. So this movie basically picks up, if I understand the timeline correctly, about 5 years since the events that took place in the first Creed movie, where now we find that Adonis, he's been taking fights left and right. He's been building up an impressive win-loss record, I should say, which he's now 23-1. And I'm like, wait a minute now. So he's had 23 fights. He's lost once. What was that first loss? Where did that one come from? Because that wasn't tackled in the first Creed movie.
That's true. It wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know if most people who saw Creed 2 saw that, but I kind of peeped that instantly going, okay, who's the first fight? Who's that one defeat? Who did he suffer that from or what have you? We see the events that pretty much had happened after Creed 1. We see that Adonis is living a relatively still quiet life with his beautiful girlfriend, who he's thinking about popping the question to. The beautiful and the lovely Bianca Taylor, portrayed by Tessa Thompson. Every time I look at her, I keep thinking that's Lisa Bonet reincarnated, but it ain't a Bonet. She's nowhere. She's not a Bonet whatsoever. But we see they're still together. They've been dating, as they've been calling it. They've been dating for a couple of years now. We see that Adonis, really, you can't think of a better way for this fight to open up than seeing Adonis fighting in the ring, right? And you're looking at him, you're going, okay, he's still in really good shape. All right, awesome. We see that Balboa is still in his corner. Balboa has all of his hair. He looks pretty good. Because remember, last we saw Balboa, he was going through the chemotherapy, and at first he was just kind of like, I'm just going to throw in the towel. Everybody I know, everybody I love, they're gone. It's just me. And you're like, wow, this guy just seems so defeated. He's just giving up on life or whatnot. And it's kind of interesting when you think about that. Just marinate on that, because we're going to be coming back to that in a little bit, because things kind of came a little bit, you could say, full circle for Balboa in this sequel. But we see that Adonis is still the man. But off the break, we also go over to Russia. And boom, right then and there, we see what has become of Dolph Lundgren's Ivan Drago character. As the Ivan Drago character, he is just living, it looks like, within the crappiest, the shittiest, the poorest neighborhood.
Ghetto neighborhood that Russia has.
That Russia has, with his grown son. And he is a coach to his son.
With a huge chip on his shoulder.
Huge chip. I mean, this literally reminded me of the YouTube Red series. I haven't watched it yet. It's on our back burner. We're going to get to it at some point in the next coming weeks, way before Christmas. But it reminds me of the Karate Kid series, little mini series that's on YouTube Red, Cobra Kai.
Yes.
It reminds me a lot about that, because you see the events that had happened for the guy who lost.
Oh, Johnny.
Yeah, Johnny. You see the events that happened with Johnny from his perspective and how he's been living life, and it's been pretty crappy for him. Well, for Ivan Drago, it's much worse than Johnny. And he's basically invested all of his time, his resources, his strength, his energy, his spirit, everything into his son, because he basically wants for his son to succeed where he failed. He wants for his son to bring back glory to Russia, for their people, but most importantly, he's looking to be redeemed through his son. And you're going, wow. I mean, when we first see Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago, you say, damn, he's aged pretty damn good.
He has.
I mean, he looks pretty tired down and all that. Yeah, that's just the makeup and what is required of the role. But he's held up. I mean, you look at him, oh, Dolph Lundgren. You don't have to do like, I'll give you a perfect example. You don't have to do like James Caan. If you look at James Caan from 1972's The Godfather and 1974's Godfather 2, and then say you go to, a film that he did in the 80s, like say, I would say maybe 1981's Thief, or that might be actually 1984's Thief. You see the transition of aging significantly as James Caan doesn't quite look like how you remember him from Godfather 1 and 2. And then most people would be like, well, you know what? You can still recognize them. Same thing with Pacino in the 70s. You recognize them in the 80s. You recognize them in the 90s. You recognize them in the 2000s. Yet sadly, when you go to James Caan when he was on that NBC series, it was a hit series for a little bit, Las Vegas. You didn't recognize him. It was like, wait, that's James Caan? Like, are we sure that's James Caan? And maybe that's like, not like, I don't know, James Caan's dad or something like that, or his brother. So it's nice to see that a guy like Dolph Lundgren, who we were really introduced to in Rocky IV and Masters of the Universe. And I mean, he's had a pretty, good career for himself. High IQ, by the way. He is a very, very smart man. I mean, his IQ is very, very high. It's nice to see that all of these years, much like Stallone, you can just be walking down the street or you could be flipping through a channel and, oh, hey, that's... Yeah. So he's held up pretty damn good. Yeah, very recognizable. His son, Drago Jr., we got to give that man some credit, by the way. Victor Drago, that is portrayed by Florian Montaneo. Got to give him props. What a beast of a man.
I would absolutely say so. Most of the shots that were shown of him in the beginning, just in standing beside someone else, it was like, whoa. Yeah. That is a beast. That is a monster. It's towering over most of his opponents.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this kid is fighting with a huge chip on his shoulder. He is boxing angry.
Most of it done by his father.
Right.
For the chip part.
Yeah.
But yes, he's hungry.
Hungry.
Very hungry.
Yeah, very, very hungry. So we see that lifestyle that's happening in Russia, but then we come on back to the States and we find that Balboa is struggling with picking up the phone and calling his son. So the impression that I'm given, that maybe we're given, is that Balboa has not got in contact with his son maybe since the events of Rocky Balboa.
Correct.
And you're kind of wondering, well, wait a minute here. How did things kind of fall like that to the point? I mean, I remember that infamous passionate speech that he gave his son in the middle of the night. And you're like, okay, this should fuel you. And now that I'm thinking about it, going back to Rocky Balboa, was the son even there for Balboa's fight?
Yes, he was.
That makes it even more.
He was there at the fight. He was in his corner. They hugged at the end, but I know there was something that was said in Creed 1, which basically they had their differences and they kind of went their separate ways. I know it was tackled in 1, and I'm pretty sure that was what was stated.
So it was touched upon, but I think that's still very interesting that whatever fallout they had, that we find Balboa now, he's in this position where he's totally alone. And he's struggling to pick up the phone. He has family. It's pretty much his last surviving family.
Yeah.
And he's not picking up the phone to call them. Meanwhile, we have Adonis. He works up the nerve to ask his girl to marry him. And, you know, their chemistry, I really had enjoyed their on screen.
Very good chemistry.
Yeah, very good chemistry.
It reminds you a lot of Adrian and Rocky.
Yeah, it does to a degree.
To a degree. I mean, they are totally their own relationship, their own entity. But it does remind you of the really good chemistry of back and forth that Adrian and Rocky had.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. Felicia Rashad is back as Mary Ann Creed, Apollo's widow and Adonis's stepmother. Remember, she took him in as a child following the death of Adonis's biological dad,
father,
Apollo Creed. And Carl Weathers' presence was felt all over this movie because there was tons of archive footage of Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed used throughout the film. The actor's likeliness through the use of photographs, murals, video shots. So that was a really nice touch, and I was really happy to see that, because remember when Rocky Balboa had came about, Carl Weathers wanted for Stallone, when he was coming up with the script, to somehow rework it in a way where he was still alive, and Stallone knew that would not be the smart move, because that would basically be saying, okay, well, part 4 didn't happen then. And he felt that what all led up to this point, he had strong enough material to build off of the events that transpired before. Because in Stallone's own words, hey, we're really focusing on the first 4 Rocky movies, not so much Rocky 5, almost to the point it kind of didn't happen. But we're focusing mainly on the events of the first 4. And that upset Carl Weathers, because he saw a money revenue making opportunity and Stallone wasn't budging. And that actually had put a little bit of a dent in their relationship. And so that's why you saw in Balboa, there was no footage whatsoever of Carl Weathers as Apollo Creed. Luckily, things got smoothed out for Creed. And then Creed 2 really being the ultimate homage. I mean, if you were to really sum up Creed 2, this was basically Apollo's revenge. That's pretty much how I would dub it.
Yeah,
right?
If you were giving it another name, absolutely.
That's how I would basically dub this, because we see this sly, slick promoter. I believe his name was Buddy. Yeah, Buddy Marcel. He basically reminded you of that fake-ass Don King from Rocky 5 that basically is looking at Ivan Drago's kid and going, hey, he is ready. Let's go ahead. Let's make this announcement. So they actually come to Philly to make the announcement that they want to challenge Adonis for the WBC heavyweight title. Unless he's scared or whatever, and media is just latching onto this bad boy. They want to see this fight. Of course, the history, and everybody's just dubbing this, hey, this is 33 years in the making. You know, we all know what happened the last time a Creed had stepped into the ring with a Drago. It didn't work out so well. Oh, this is 33 years in the making. And we see a situation now, they're borrowing elements from Rocky 3, where basically Rocky 3 first takes on Mr. T's Clubber Lang and gets owned.
Yes.
And that's basically what happens to Adonis. Yes. He gets owned. And, you know, when he's talking to Balboa about this, he's like, hey, you know, we got to take this fight. And one of the first things that Balboa says to him is, why are you fighting? Why are you doing this? What are you fighting for? And Adonis doesn't really have that answer. He's basically saying, hey, you know, I got to take this fight. And Balboa's like, is this about your dad? Because that's not your fight. You know, that's mine. I'm still fighting that to this day. Hey, I should have threw in the towel and I didn't. I have to live with that, you know. And, you know, at this point, this is just a young man and Adonis that feels he has to take on this fight because, honestly, even though he didn't say it, what you're led to believe from the viewing standpoint is that the pressure is on him. That
because it's his father's fight.
Right. And so
his fight.
Right. And that it's a situation where, well, what will people say about me because I am my father's son? I am continuing the legacy. What will people say about me if I don't take this fight? So he took this fight for all the wrong reasons. And as far as Balboa was concerned, Balboa never said, and I don't honestly believe that Balboa was trying to put down Adonis in any type of way because Adonis asked him, you don't think I can beat him? And Balboa's like, no, it's nothing like that at all. He's just bigger. He's meaner. He's
hungry.
He's hungry. You know, he's hungrier. He has nothing to lose, but you do.
And that reminds you of Rocky 3's Mickey and Rocky when he was doubting that within himself.
Exactly. And especially because remember, his head was so damn rattled by a couple of things. One, it turned out Mickey had staged some fights. Yeah, he basically handpicked weak ass opponents, right, on purpose.
Yep.
Because he knew that the first two fights against Creed took its toll on him physically, and that he wasn't quite the same man that he once was prior to locking up with Creed, and that's why he had some of those weak ass fights. And Clubber Lang could like smell this a mile away. And then combine that with Mickey having the heart attack, right? Matter of fact, no, Mickey died.
No, Mickey died.
Yeah, he died. Died shortly after the match was over.
Within the match, really.
No, remember he made it long enough to go back to the back.
After he got knocked out, he made it long enough until Rocky got there and pretty much within seconds.
Right. Because Mickey was like, how'd you do? And he was like, did okay, or whatever. Yeah. And then he passed, just like that. Yeah. So, I mean, literally elements of Rocky 3, and you're going, woo. You know, so now the role of Mickey is portrayed by Balboa, who's going, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be there for you, experiencing what I experienced with your dad. No, I don't want to relive that again. So he backs out. And Adonis is pissed. Adonis is like, after everything I've done for you, is really like this. And I get where Adonis is coming from, because, I mean, we would later learn that if it wasn't for, come on, put two and two together. Yeah, if it wasn't for Adonis, Balboa probably would not be alive because of how expensive his cancer treatment.
Well, that plus the companionship. I mean, they honestly at that point needed each other in one.
Yeah.
But I get where there is the sense of, well, I'm there for you. Why can't you be there for me?
Exactly.
But I also, on the same flip side of that coin, get Rocky's, I can't go through that again with you like I did with your father.
Yeah. that's too much. That's opening up a bad wound. I get that. I totally get that. Eventually, we see Adonis and Bianca. They go back to Cali because Adonis is so pissed off
with Rocky not helping him.
That they just pick up their life, and
they had been toying around with it first.
Right.
But when
Bianca kind of pushed him, if you think about it, because early on, before all of the shit broke out, Bianca was like, "Hey, Rocky has his own life to live, and we gotta be worried about us." And the way that she delivered it, she wasn't being cold. She just was literally saying, "Hey, look, we got our own lives that we have to live, and he's doing his thing." And so they used that as the perfect opportunity to turn a negative into a positive and just head on back to California. They wanted more space anyway.
They also wanted for her career to blossom.
Right.
And she knew that in Cali that could happen. That could happen.
And it did happen. Also, big bombshell. Turns out she was pregnant.
Yeah, and the Adonis' stepmom is the one who actually pointed it out, and they were both like, "Absolutely not."
Yeah,
and that was actually a cute, funny scene.
That was a funny scene, very funny scene. Of course, we see Balboa. He tries to travel back long after they get situated out in Cali. He takes this fight, first go round with Drago. Loses. I mean, he is just beaten up really bad, cracked ribs, ruptured kidney, swollen eye, closed shut. I mean, this dude is just all messed up. He needs some months of recovery. He ain't gonna be fighting no time, right? So you kind of got the impression that maybe it was about 6 to 8 months that had went by after the events. Yeah, after the events of that fight. We see Balboa, he actually went out of his way from Philly to come on back to Cali and apologize for not being there for the kid. But Adonis ain't trying to hear that. Adonis is throwing himself a pity party, and that pissed me off because it's like, nah, man, take self-accountability. You're the one that wanted this fight, right?
You can't quite see that when you're hurt.
Of course.
Because all you see is the letdown of that person wasn't in your corner.
That's true.
But should he have taken it out on him? No.
No.
Do most people? Yes.
Yeah, and it pissed me off because it's like, no, it's like, it's self-accountability. It's like, dude, you're the one that wanted this fight. You wanted it. Come on now. This is what happens with fighters, for better or worse.
That's true.
You're not going to win all of them. So, take a little bit of self-accountability here. At the end of the day, you're the one that was hell-bent, gun-ho. You took this match, right? Bianca didn't tell you to take this match. Shit, you didn't even consult with Bianca on what to do. This was a renegade.
This is my decision. This is what I'm going to do. And that's what it's going to be. And with that, there wasn't the head work that needed to be done.
Right. Exactly. So you see some months go by. They welcome their first child into the world. Scary situation, because one of the questions that was brought up right before the child's birth was, okay, is she gonna have the same hereditary defect that Bianca has with her hearing?
Right.
And as we would see, that is the case. And you kind of felt a little bit bad, but at the same time, with the advancement of technology, you're going, it's not all that bad. And, she's still going to be a smart, beautiful kid. She's got good parents. She's going to be okay. She just needs extra loving and attention. That's all that basically needs. And a lot more patience. That's all that basically is.
Absolutely. And also Rocky saying, being that coach again, but not as the ring or in the ring, but more of a life coach, and saying, how are you feeling about her? What are you going to do for her if it is that way? Yeah. And then he says, you're going to love her. And he's like, well, of course. He's like, well, I guarantee you she's not currently having the pity party that you are currently throwing for her.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that was some strong words right there.
And it was like, wow.
Yeah. That was some strong words right there.
And then with that life advice, it was like, okay, well, let me move forward. Let me figure out what my next step is.
And it was kind of interesting because as we see Adonis trying to find himself out of this hole that he's in with this self-pity party, very similar to Rocky 3. You know, once again, you got to go back to Rocky 3. A combination of Rocky 2, Rocky 2 and 3.
Because Rocky 2 is where Dad was having the pity party.
Yeah, Rocky 2 and 3. And, you know, now we find Balboa kind of in that role of Mick once again.
Absolutely.
Trying to wait it out, figure out what Adonis is going to do, right? Now, it's basically like reverse roles here.
Absolutely.
You know, and a lot of, if you're noticing the theme here, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about with Creed 2 is recycled, and a lot of it is predictable. I would definitely say that. A lot of it is predictable.
Agree.
A lot of it is predictable, especially with regards to the rematch, right? So you hear, okay, so folks, when these guys meet up, it's on U.S. soil. So now, when the rematch comes about, and I thought the way that they did the rematch, that was a great twist. Because
I agree.
Because I like the fact that Drago Jr. could have been champion, but ended up not becoming champion because he got himself disqualified. And,
in the first match.
Right,
yes.
in the first match. And we won't tell you guys how that came about, but that was clever writing that they did right there, which basically had protected Adonis as still the WBC heavyweight champion. And eventually it sets up a rematch between the two because Drago's promoter and all that, they're like, hey, he is still the uncrowned champion, blah, 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 blah. It's like, hey, Adonis has to accept the rematch. You know, come on. You know, he's the only real challenge that's out there. So when the rematch does happen, it happens now in Russia. And I thought that made so much sense. A little bit predictable, but I thought it made a lot of sense that they did it in Russia. And we learn a really big bombshell, which is a lot of the hate that the son is feeling. You know, it's like, because they're at this nice, I don't know if they're at the president's.
That's the way it came off.
That's how it came off, didn't it? Yeah. I mean, they're like eating these nice, big, extravagant meals, you know, drinking nice, fine wine, and they're being lavish with gifts. And, like, we learn that, holy crap, one of the reasons why Ivan is so pissed off, not only did the people turn their back on him when he returned to Mother Russia, but he lost his wife in the process as well. And so you hear that and you're going, whoa, so the wife left Ivan Drago? And it's like, no. She didn't just leave Ivan Drago. She left the lives of Ivan and the son. And you're going, whoa, what a cold bitch. And so who's there to basically, what you guys are doing is so wonderful for Mother Russia.
And the funny thing is, it almost came off like she was actually the wife of, or certainly dating, the head boss or the head, whatever you want to call him, prime minister or what have you, of Russia. Yeah. And I don't know, just that's the way it came off to me.
You know, they never did really establish if that was
the case.
No. What I was going to say was they never did establish if that was his wife. You know that is the mother of Drago Jr.
Right.
And that they had relations.
Right.
Right. You definitely know that. So, but it's never, as far as I can recall, it never is established that, hey, you two were once married. So you're almost kind of under the impression that with regards to Ivan Drago's mom, you're almost led to the impression, hey, she got with him because he was a hot up-and-coming fighter. She knew where the money was.
That is the way that they are portraying her character. Absolutely.
Right. And I mean, she hadn't aged a bit.
Oh, she has.
No.
Not in a bad way.
Not in a bad way.
But she has a little bit.
I thought time did very nice to her. I mean, the white hair, I mean, for a lot of people, it's like, well, she's got white hair. But I mean, if I can look at your face and go, oh, you look like you've only aged by 15 years. You're still very recognizable. That's how she kind of looked to me.
About right.
It was just white hair, right? I wish I knew the actress's name. I'm actually looking in the notes. Yes.
Mother?
Yeah, yes. Bridget Nielsen as Ludmila Drago. Oh, yes.
Yes,
I'm
that
looking
was
at the
his
credits.
wife,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm looking at the credits. Yeah, it's Ivan's wife and Victor's mother. Wow. So not a girlfriend.
No. I knew that was the wife, but what I was saying was the way it was portrayed is that it was either a really close friend of who she was sitting with and who was
I didn't focus on that.
Oh,
What
okay.
I focused on was what Ivan said and what the son said, which is basically, hey, mom left us. Mom left us because when we came back, we didn't do good we didn't do good in that fight. I did not do good in that fight. I lost. And as a result of that, everybody just crapped on me, even your mom. Right. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm focused more on, wow. So when the chips were down, mom, you didn't roll with the punches. You just fucking said, well, I'm going on to my next meal ticket. That's literally what she did.
Yeah.
And to see the son so pissed off going, hey, how the hell could you sit with them? And the father reminds him, hey, this is all about restoring the name. This is all about restoring glory. This is basically all about getting back to good. The father's really trying to calm the son down with this one. But I totally see where the son is coming from, because it's like, hey, what happens when you lose again? What happens if we don't get the job done? The son never says that, but you can't help but wonder, well, what happens if you don't get the job done? Are these people still going to be in your corner this go round? Are they going to be more sympathetic and be like, you know what, you put up a very valiant effort, and because of that, you know what, you still did us proud? What happened? No. So we get to the rematch, and of course the way that the training had went about, very similar to Rocky IV. Right? Really stripped down core basics. I mean, very kind of predictable there. Right?
I agree.
The finish of the match, the rematch that is, went down exactly the way we thought it was going to go down.
Not for me.
No, when I say the rematch went down exactly the way I thought it was going to go down, I knew that Adonis was going to win.
Yes,
because now he had the
eye.
Because now he had the eye of the tiger.
Oh yeah, no, the predictability, yes, in that I knew he was going to win.
Yeah,
but in the twist that they did, I didn't expect that.
As far as him winning, or you be more specific?
No. So at the second matchup, I didn't expect for Drago to throw in the towel to save his son. And
oh yeah, that was a nice twist. Yeah.
So with that being a twist,
wasn't trying to give that away to the folks, but that's okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Spoiler alert, folks.
Yeah.
But for that, it also is, in thinking about it, a good way to save face. So he didn't essentially lose. Dad just kind of threw out in the towel to somewhat save him from the same life that he had.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. I just kind of felt that overall, kind of getting back and putting a nice pretty ribbon around it, a lot of elements borrowed from previous Rocky movies. We do see that Rocky at the end is finally able to establish contact with his son, and the actor that was in Rocky Balboa that portrayed his son actually reprises the role in this one. So that was a really nice touch to see. And but for me, definitely predictable from a lot of standpoints. If there was ever an opportunity to do some serious hard twists, hey, you didn't see this one coming, whatnot, they really had the opportunity to do it. Now, despite the fact that you can see this coming miles away, right? It was still an enjoyable movie. Killer freaking soundtrack. I loved the boxing fighting sequences. I thought that was awesome. I'm not really sure if Stallone was at the helm of this once again. I would like to be under the impression that he was, because that is his expertise. So I would like to believe that he had some type of input with regards to the fighting sequences. But the production value standpoint, as always, it seems like every single time they do these Rocky movies, Creed, whatever you want to call it, I call it the Rocky movies. It seems like every single time you do these movies, the production value for these fights, it gets better and better.
Yes.
And it's basically what you are seeing today in, on HBO, Showtime, pay-per-view, UFC. I just love how all of that just basically came together. And it brings up a very interesting question now, which is, let's just say, hypothetically speaking, this movie does well. Maybe not as well as 2015's Creed, but let's just say it does well enough that, we should make a sequel. I personally feel that you don't need to do a sequel because I'm looking at what's left over. Okay, let's go over this real quick. Now, is there a part of me that's a little bit curious? Okay, well, how are things between Rocky and now that he's a granddad and, now that he's gotten back with his son? There is that little part of me that's a bit curious what's going on with that, but not enough to warrant, okay, out of 100%, 25, 30% of the movie, I want to see that. I want to see that element. There's not that part of me that really, so I got to scratch that off. But there is a little bit there that you can come back to. Also, what's going on with Bianca and Adonis's daughter? How is she coping with this hereditary deficiency, disability? How is she holding up, right? There's a part of me that's a little bit curious, like 5 years later, where exactly is she? How is she coping and everything? So there's that part of me, but then there's that bigger part of me that has a fear of seeing basically Rocky in the position of Paulie in the next movie, which is basically Rocky's role is even more diminished, right? Because now we see Adonis, he's gone on to younger people that can help him and get him. Because for me, looking at how things just played out in this one, it really just kind of felt like Balboa has taken Adonis as far as he can go. Like he's taught him everything that he knows and then some. And now it's just up to Adonis to keep it going. Like if you were to do another Creed movie, I think you have to kill off the Balboa character. And I know a lot of people would not want that. Me and Tammy are the ultimate Rocky Balboa fans. But just realistically speaking, you can't keep going to the well like what we just talked about with Creed 2 and do a bunch of recycle this, recycle that, recycle this, recycle that.
Yeah, so it's going to get old and it's going to get boring. Now, I know for me, if that were the case and there was a Creed 3 and it did have Balboa in it, I'd go see it just because I grew up with that franchise.
But the
part
question,
of me. But should it? I think if it were, it needs to be greatly diminished, or he is somewhat of a life coach, someone that he goes to talk to maybe once in the movie. He's struggling with some kind of idea, something that he needs some serious help on, like that father figure. Then maybe. But he has pretty much in Creed 2 passed the torch.
Right.
Seriously. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But once you see it, you guys will understand what we're talking about. So, do I think it will be, if there is a Creed 3, that there will be a Balboa? I don't know. I really don't know. I have serious reservations that there will be, if they decide to continue on with the franchise.
Now, let's answer the question a different way for listeners that are hearing this. Should there be a Creed 3? I say no.
I don't see that there's really much more to tell with the story.
And that's the point where I'm at.
You would have to come out with some really kick-ass, somewhat of a story that's left untold, but so much new that needs to be told.
But what's left? That's what I'm saying. What rock has not been unturned during this whole Rocky Balboa franchise?
The only thing that you could go with is give it 5-10 years and give it to the story of continuation of Creed as Adonis. And him, like you said, him doing his thing with other trainers, this, that, and the other. But there's not a whole lot there unless you're really willing to rehash.
Exactly. And okay, so again.
So basically, if you're asking me, should there be?
And I did.
And you did. For me, I will watch anything that's within the Rocky franchise.
Well, we know that.
I know. I'm just saying, I will. So you're asking someone who's partial. That's what I'm saying. To the franchise. So if it comes out, I'm going to watch it. Should there be?
That's the question.
Because I don't think there's not enough to tell.
That's the question. Should there be?
Reluctantly, I'm going to probably say no.
Okay. Right, because you're being reluctant because this is what you've grown up on.
Yes.
Right. And to admit that is also admitting that you're at the end of the road with the Rocky Balboa. And see, I think that's the dilemma that's why I kept probing you like that.
I will be honest with you and tell you, for me, there were certain parts in there that made me really melancholy.
For me, just seeing the Balboa character get older and older and older, and just the way that this one ends, it's almost like, I don't want to say curtain call, but it kind of feels like Balboa has transitioned from one plane to another. And I don't mean airplane, right. He's literally gone from, he's put down one hat and he's picking up another.
Absolutely.
That's how it literally felt in this one. So, I'm partial as well. I love all things Rocky Balboa, but I'm in that position where I'm not reluctant. I'm just kind of going, wow, if you're going to go back to the well, you're really grasping for straws. You really, really are.
True.
And unless you're going to kill off the Rocky Balboa character, you just need to let things be as it is. Let people just have their own imagination and but I don't think there's anything there. Remember, Stallone spent years trying to figure out what would be the right type of storyline. There was many years where he wasn't even interested in doing a Rocky movie.
That's true.
And then there was some type of an itch, and then all of a sudden it was, and then you had a situation where probably for years you had people that were saying, well, and I was one of those people, well, what if Creed had a son? It makes sense for the son to seek out the help. And a lot of people were like, yeah, but the timeline, that would mean that the kid is now like in his 40s and he's just now trying to get revenge. How the hell do you explain that?
Right.
And the way that they went about explaining it was freaking brilliant. I personally felt.
True.
So, yeah, sadly, and I think a lot of you Rocky Balboa fans, whether you want to admit it or not, you're going to find yourself in the same position that we're presenting to you, which is, okay, come on now, Stallone is 72 going on 73, so there's not that many more of these he can do. One, the script has to be freaking on point. It has to make a lot of sense. And then even if you have the script, okay, well, can you get everybody back on board to be invested? And pretty much everybody from the first Creed came back and reprised their roles because they believed in the script.
Yep.
So I don't think it was so much money. They believed in, okay, yeah, we do got something here. And one last thing, I thought it was awesome that the Winkler family was all over this one. We stayed for the credits, and the Winklers were back in full effect. And if you guys remember, the Winklers were involved with the first one, the second one, and the fourth one. They were involved in this one. I want to say that maybe they were involved with Balboa, but I'm not really sure. I'm just going to leave Balboa up in the air. I'm kind of leaning more towards no.
I'm thinking no.
Yeah, I'm leaning more towards no. Because I would have remembered something like that. Yeah, I would have remembered something like that. Yeah, so, yeah, but I would say that Creed 2, even though it was very predictable and everything, I would say that Creed 2 gets a pass.
Oh, strong pass from me.
Yeah, and in a lot of elements better than the first one. And I think for me, it was better than the first one just from the standpoint of, okay, now it's full circle.
Absolutely.
I think that was more appealing, was that now it's full circle, you know, avenging the death of, even though Balboa did it, well, you know, the son now is trying to, you know, for the son, it was all about getting that closure as well, that proper closure and continuing the legacy himself.
Right.
You know, kind of, hey, Dad, I know for your legacy, you know, that you had put forth, and I'm following in that legacy. I know you had this one blemish. I know that Balboa did what he did, but I'm continuing on the name. And hey, so I kind of like how everything came full circle.
Right. But he honestly did it for his own reasons as well.
Yes.
By, you know,
he found that eye of the tiger.
Yes, he found the eye of the tiger. But he also, with that finding the eye of the tiger, he made it his own.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. We want to hear what you had thought about Creed 2. So sound off. Get at us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Use the keywords, the RCWR show. That's how you can find us that way. If that's kind of throwing you off, well, you know, every single Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern, after WWE SmackDown goes off the air, we do a little something called the RCWR Show with Lee Sanders, covering all things wrestling, entertainment, and beyond, and have been doing so since 2011. Before we get ready to end this broadcast, special shout out to our Patreon members, as they are the heartbeat. They are the backbone of why you are able to check out bonus content, such as what you're checking out right now. Shout out to Anthony Missionary Thomas of Wrestling Soup. Shout out to Michael Wolf. Shout out to Joe Raymond Jr. Also, shout out to John Davis. Shout out to our Patreon members. Be a Patreon member. $5 a month gets you access to new and exclusive audio and video content. She's the beautiful and the lovely Tammy. Lee is my name. Movies is my game. Thank you for checking out 30 with Lee.
Thanks for listening. An Infinity One Productions presentation, keeping it honest, insightful, and interactive.